Good to see you. How are you?
Good to see your face, Mario. I am okay.
I feel that.
I'm
I
I'm
feel you.
alive in the year 2020, so that's
Hmm. Well, I'm grateful you're alive in the year 2020 and riding this wave of what's going on, everything that's going on. I feel you. I'm with you. We're not alone. So thanks to everybody for tuning in right now and taking some time out of your night to join us with everything going on. Um, yeah, really grateful. We got Patty Kaishian here tonight, and hopefully kind of lighten the mood. And I don't necessarily want to distract us from what's going on, but I do in many ways want to distract us in a good way. So, and what better way to talk about fungi and talk philosophy with Patty Kaishian here today. So just wanted to maybe just invite everybody who's with us right now across the world, across the country, to just kind of take a deep breath together, and then that way we could kind of just be in this moment and connect our breaths and all the different places that we are. So, thank you. Thanks, y'all. So again, I'm Mario. I'm here on Kumeyaay territory, also known as San Diego. And I'm really grateful, really happy and excited to have Patty Kaishian on here. Dr. Kaishian, it's an honor to know you. It's an honor to call you friend. Um, Thanks so much for agreeing to do this. I know you have a busy schedule as well, and I know you have a lot going on. So thank you. Really grateful.
oh,
And
thank you, Mario. I'm super happy to be here. You're definitely a friend, so happy to spend time with you on these during these crazy hours.
yeah, for sure. Well, thank you again. Well, I kind of just, I mean, we got an hour, and we're going to do our best to get through as much as we can. And we'll probably save some of the questions for the end. Sorry if I don't respond to, any of your comments on here, but I just want to give Patty some time to talk about her work and just, all the things that are happening, everything that comes up. So without further ado, Patty, if you want to introduce yourself and kind of let us know your name and what you do and what you're up to.
Thanks. So yeah, I'm Patty Kaishian, and I'm a mycologist. I'm currently working at Purdue University, which is in Lafayette, Indiana. And I just moved here from Syracuse, so I was formerly, and I got used to saying that I was on Haudenosaunee land with near the Onondaga Nation, and now it seems to be Potawatomi land, but it's a sort of mixing of Miami and a few different groups, but I think predominantly Potawatomi. So I'm just learning the area, and I'm happy to be here. It was sort of crazy to move in the midst of a pandemic, but I'm still sort of getting to explore the land, and definitely a bit of a culture shock moving from New York to the Midwest.
Mm,
But I don't know. I was a little judgy, I guess, about the Midwest, but it's been nice. So,
I'm sure.
um, yeah.
I would
But
have the same. I would feel the same probably.
yeah. But people are really friendly for them. Well, sometimes, so that's good. A little more
Good.
talkative in New York.
Yeah.
um, yeah, but I'm doing a project I'm in the lab of Dr. Kathy Aim, and so I'm a taxonomist. I study and describe new species of fungi, and I did my PhD on these insect parasites, and I defended my degree just in August, so it's been like a whirlwind.
Mm,
Now I'm here working on a different group of fungi, the rust fungi, which I'm sure you've probably seen around, but they're plant pathogens. And there's thousands of species of them. They're this enormous group of plant pathogens, and they're like they can be really tiny or really actually quite large, and they're sort of have really complex life cycles. They live sometimes on multiple different plant types to complete their life cycle, so they're pretty interesting. And I'm working on a project where we're doing DNA barcoding of over 1,000 species of rusts, to generate sequence data for them, and then be able to like create a database for DNA sequences, and using our collection at Purdue to do that. So it's a cool project. I'm happy to be part of it.
Yeah, super
Mhm.
cool. It sounds really cool. Um, so you're interested in the fungi that many people kind of just look over sometimes, just kind of
Yeah,
pass by and stuff, not really pin.
particularly, yeah, my study subjects for my PhD in particular, like only about 4 or 5 people in the world study that group of fungi. And they don't really have an application that's of economic interest.
Right.
And they're not even, they like are really small. So people are just, oh, they overlook them. So it's like very curiosity driven research, not funding driven research. So,
Very cool.
mhm.
Well, thank you, for sharing, what you do. I kind of wanted to ask a little bit about your heritage and like why science too, and like if anything, from your upbringing, kind of, uh, you know, piqued your interest in science, and how has science, just played in your, is it part of your culture? Was it, yeah, where did science come in, and mycology, I guess, and more specifically, when did that
Yeah,
happen?
I couldn't really say that it's like, so a cultural thing. I mean, I grew up in New York, and my parents had us like outside a lot. So we
Mhm.
spent a ton of time outside in the woods, and I was really drawn immediately towards like kind of these like creepier creatures. I spent a lot of time catching like frogs and snakes, and I was really drawn towards them. I felt a certain kinship towards these sort of unloved organisms, like underdog
Yeah.
organisms. And I spent a lot of time sort of just exploring that, like the woods, and thinking about just being in community with like organisms that I thought other people kind of looked over. And I definitely do, intellectually now, I think it makes sense to make a connection to my identity as like a queer woman, and as a child, sort of a genderqueer child, and then now as an adult I identify as bisexual, a bisexual woman. But I definitely think there was a kinship there that I felt like I didn't really want to do what
Mhm.
girls were doing, but also I just kind of felt like I felt like there was, I existed sort of between labels, and I felt this beautiful thing kind of forming between me and the other organisms. Um, so that definitely played a role in sort of developing a respect and a love for things that I think other people sort of didn't quite understand.
Hmm.
Um,
Beautiful. I love that. I can relate in many ways. But thank
mhm.
you for putting it like that. And yeah, that was beautiful. I appreciate that.
Oh, and yeah.
Um,
I mean,
yeah.
and then I did want to bring up, I don't want to have an audience without talking about, so I'm of Armenian heritage, and I'm also Irish, but I'm part Armenian. And my last name Kaishian, it's an Armenian name. Well, actually, in fact, most like multi-syllabic names that end in IAN or YAN are Armenian. And Armenia is a country. A lot of people don't know where it is because it's really, really small. But it's wedged between Turkey and Iran, and Azerbaijan. It borders, Iran is to the south, um, Azerbaijan is to the east, and Turkey is to the west, and Georgia is to the north. So it's just a very small country there. And Armenians are indigenous people to the highlands of West Asia. The Armenian highlands used to be quite an expansive area. And the Ottoman Empire colonized and subjugated Armenians pretty viciously. And it actually, and there was a genocide. They committed a genocide in 1915 that led to the death of over 1 million Armenians. And my great grandparents fled that genocide, and that's how my family ended up in the United States. And I bring this up now because tragically, much of the racist sentiment against Armenians that was harbored by the Ottoman Empire, which is now kind of modern day Turkey, is tragically very much alive and well, and has actually the violence against Armenians never really stopped because Turkey never really acknowledged the genocide and has never truly been held to account. And there have been a number of flare-ups of ethnic violence against Armenians, including pogroms where thousands of Armenians have been slaughtered based on their ethnicity. And again, now today, currently, there's a genocide watch in Armenia, particularly at the hands of Azerbaijan, which is an ally of Turkey. And they've been they're basically trying to reclaim this land that's named Artsakh, or Nagorno-Karabakh. Armenians call it Artsakh, and that's how I'll refer to it here. But it's a disputed territory, although it's 95 or more % of the Armenians that live in the area, that live there are ethnically Armenian, and they are indigenous to that land. But due to some sort of, colonial meddling by Stalin, the land was given to Azerbaijan in 1920. And Azerbaijan technically legally possesses it, but it's been inhabited by indigenous Armenians for millennia, for thousands of years. And now there's a war on the area where Azerbaijan has been using unprecedented amount of drones and cluster bombs, and really just mercilessly attacking the indigenous Armenian population there. And it's now at the level of genocide. So I know that maybe this isn't what people tuned in to hear about, but I can't really talk about much else right now without at least mentioning what's going on there. So I do urge people to look into the conflict, and I wanted to give a platform to this it's an indigenous issue. It's an issue of indigenous sovereignty and racial justice. So I think this is an appropriate platform to discuss that. So if you're interested in learning more about it, it is there's a number of resources that I'd be happy to share. The armenianfund.org is a place where you can donate and get resources. So I would like to direct you all there.
Thank you so much. I was, writing some of that stuff down, and you broke that really down very eloquently, really well right now. And I just learned a lot myself, and you answered some of the questions I was going to have for you. But, this platform, is always dedicated to Indigenous people everywhere. And so thank you for bringing this up, as it is important to recognize, the state of colonialism, and, how colonialism is affecting folks all over the world still to this day. It's not a thing of the past, and it's still happening right now. And there are Indigenous people in other parts of the world who've been occupying those spaces for thousands of years, like you said, that are still, suffering the consequences of colonialism and things that have, that were set in place, a couple hundred years ago, and even less, 100 years ago, So, so thank you for letting us know about what's happening there, and I thank your grandparents for making it here in 1915, and I'm sure there was a lot of trauma and lots of it shows the resilience of a people, and that I know I can identify with, because I know my people have to endure a lot as well, and have had to travel to find safety. So just thank you for saying that, and taking that time out to touch on that.
Thanks for giving me the space for that. I appreciate it.
Anytime. That's a lot. And I was watching what's going on. It is heavy, and I just want to urge folks to, I know there's a lot going on, and it seems like there's not maybe a lot of room to educate yourself on other things that are happening that aren't pertaining to you. But I think that's a lot of what's part of the problem. And I think that's probably why a lot of this is happening right now, specifically during elections, while people are maybe not paying too close of attention.
Yeah, I mean, that's an explicit That's explicitly true. Yeah, there was an intention to capitalize on this conflict, right? At the height of the pandemic and around the U.S. election, so there would be like the ultimate amount of like distraction, so
Sure.
people would have like minimal capability to extend their sphere of awareness beyond
Exactly.
and understandably so. I'm not angry at people for just not knowing about something, right? Of course.
Right.
But it adds to the tragedy that a lot of us are so exhausted emotionally that it's but yet these Armenians have been just through like hundreds of years of generational struggle, and it continues today. I do fear actually that it's not impossible that Armenia would cease to exist. That is the stated goal of politicians in Azerbaijan and Turkey, is to 100% eliminate Armenia. So that's not like euphemism or embellishment or exaggeration. In fact, they're not even speaking in euphemism often. They're just saying like we want to kill Armenians.
Right.
So
I think
being very, it's like they're you can, it's in writing. It's in
it's ugly. I've seen
it. Yeah.
Deep breath for everybody out there. I feel like taking a moment for everybody who's just lost their lives already, to all the families out there, and I think it feels appropriate just to kind of give it a minute.
Yeah, I did just see that a friend of mine, Tracy, posted in the comments a resource. Rigs is a resource collective of women who are activists, for Armenian activists, and they're a great source to follow for information on the struggle and to find out. They elevate Armenian women experiences, and give you ways to donate and to share and boost. And so I would check that out.
Perfect. Maybe we'll share some of these resources after. I'll try to make a little post and put some links up to these folks and ways to support.
Yeah.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of a good time to maybe talk about a lot of the work you do. You're a scientist. But your work that's coming out, and it has a lot to do with the intersections in politics, has a lot to do with intersections in philosophy, and just the way we're starting to view science, and I think it's a kind of an exciting time with everything going on. I still see a lot of great minds coming and shaping the dialogue and kind of curving a little bit of our view, of our Western view, or that's often been cis hetero view of science and the world, and often been kind of reductionist in views. I just wanted to kind of I think that's why I'm really attracted to your work, especially because I love scientists. I don't deny science at all, but there's a lot of other things that are also important to me, and that are important to my community, and so I've had to navigate some of those spaces as far as politics, and when it comes to spirituality, and when it comes to cultural appropriation. So your work is just amazing because it is intersectional, and it does explore these other facets of science and politics, like I said. So if you can talk a little bit about that, and how that's, if you can just talk a little bit about that, I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. So as I mentioned, I am an academically trained mycologist, but in my education as a scientist, I was always interested in many disciplines. I took as many classes as I could in my liberal arts education, and I really enjoyed philosophy and religious studies and a variety of classes along those. Anthropology. I think my minor was in anthropology, actually. But one thing that I noticed when I started studying mycology so I went to SUNY ESF, which is it's a great school. I really love it there. Very super earthy, like the earthiest who all are just like super, science nerds. And I love them, so absolutely no shade on it. But I did notice that a lot of my peers were not particularly interested in stepping outside of the the precise discipline that they were being trained in. And I remember in particular taking a seminar on just sort of a general grad student sort of basics of science, like grant writing or scientific writing, and but we also had a segment on philosophy of science, and I was like so into that. I was like, what is knowledge? What does it mean? What is it? I was just like so pumped to be talking about truly what is science. And I was a little disappointed that my peers didn't quite share the enthusiasm. They were just like, I just want to measure this, and I love this. I love birds, and it was they kind of insisted, not insisted forcefully, but just sort of were not particularly eager to. In some case, in I would say on average, not particularly eager to really dissect and try to find out why those types of questions, what is science? Why do you need to be able to answer that question as a scientist? And so I started to realize that there was a cultural norm of not really interrogating, there was not a lot of reflexivity, you could say, not a lot of self-reflection or self-interrogation about your scientific method and why you're doing it, and what informs your perspective on your science. And I thought that left for a lot of room for science to be misused or misunderstood or misapplied. And I also noticed that people are not really comfortable reckoning with the ways in which science has been used for in the pursuit of racial or gendered hierarchy. And I think it's really important that scientists are able to articulate why, grapple with the history of eugenics, for example. I think it's critical that a scientist should be able to articulate where has science been used for evil, and why was it evil, and why was it bad, and why should you be able to navigate that space. I think the ethics, scientific ethics are not really the exploration of those ethics I think are underdeveloped in the average science education. So that kind of led me to want to engage with that more. And then, circling into my identities, as I would say predominantly, as a woman and as a queer woman, those identities in science, because I present, and particularly, most conspicuously, my gender identity is really, affects me as a scientist. You are treated differently, very directly on the basis of your gender. And while I think people, whether they might have homophobia, but they might not know about my orientation. So I would say that in general, my gender does play a larger role. And I've had a lot of seriously negative experiences as a woman in science, anything from just, getting poor reviews by student, in your, when students write their reviews at the end of the semester, or just, not really being taken seriously by students or older peers or colleagues, and not being treated as even now having a PhD, I think I still feel like people assume I'm an undergrad when they see me. So it's just that made me, there were all these issues in science that I think that scientists are not very comfortable talking about, and that kind of led me to explore philosophy of science as it pertains to mycology specifically. Mycology is just full of examples of biological examples that are subverting the norms, right? And I thought that was just absolutely ripe for exploration, applying a philosophical lens to that, and trying to understand why mycology is less studied than other organisms.
Yeah, I think that's another reason why I'm drawn to your work as well, because you do make that parallel between identity, and being queer, and then even and mushrooms as well, and I think there's been a lot of new work and inspiration in people who are called to this work, especially recently. I've been asked a lot about mushrooms being queer, and what that looks like. And so I often talk about your work, and because I've been influenced by your work, and I think some of that language probably has came out of some of your work actually, and I've seen some folks quote some things and maybe not often give you credit for some of the things that they're saying, and I'm like, I think I know where that came from. But if anybody ever wants to know where some of these concepts are coming from, it's from right here. It's from Dr. Patty Kaishian, who's been pretty much doing a lot of this work, and I think it's time we kind of set the record straight, so to say.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, just like I said, if you want to talk a little bit about that, and a lot of folks, like I said, are called to this work, and mushrooms in particular, because maybe in a lot of ways they identify with them not being so binary a lot of the times. So
Sure, for sure,
can you talk
yeah.
a little bit about that and how
Yeah,
your
so
experience?
I was really hoping the paper would be out by the time we had this little interview, but unfortunately the journal is just they're still prepping it, so it should be they said it would come out this week, so hopefully any day now the paper will be out, and it's called The Science Underground: Mycology is a Queer Discipline, and it's published in the journal Catalyst, which is a feminist theory journal. And so the paper is basically, I wrote it with my dear friend and fellow Armenian, actually, Hasmik Jalakian, and so we have 2 Armenian names on this paper, which is really exciting because there's so few of us. So
Yeah.
But yeah, we basically applied, I was interested in looking at a variety of angles of mycology. So, people talk about how there are mushrooms that have thousands of sexes, which is true. And that's been talked about, right? But that's super cool and interesting. But there's, and then there's also the fact that, fungi can be they can have a variety of different sexual stages, and there's the Laboboneales that I studied, some are monoecious, meaning that their sexual reproductive organs are in one body, or they can be dioecious when they can be in 2, or even trioecious when they're in both, different, they can be present with the male and female separate and then also together. So there's all sorts of just ways in which fungi are sort of defying these biological norms. And then in addition, I think that there's this long held perception that fungi are sort of from this otherworldly realm, but in a negative way. And a lot of that is rooted in, Western scientific conceptions around norms and what is a valid way of being and what is not. And it's not quite easy to locate exactly where this comes from, but certainly steeped throughout a lot of Western European culture, there are all sorts of references to fungi being gross and degenerate and sort of sickly and foul. And, Emily Dickinson has poetry about it. I'm blanking on his name right now, but the author of, oh shoot, Conan Doyle, his name is, but the author Conan Doyle writes about just how mushrooms are these foul pustules of the earth and can find rot, right? And there's just an extensive history around mushrooms being treated as these disturbances to the natural order. There's so in Emily Dickinson's poem, she talks about she compares them to Judas from the Bible, but as if betraying the holiness that was Jesus,
Wow.
really loaded stuff, right?
Right.
And then so there's this whole, but so science is, as an academic discipline, is obviously rooted largely in Western Europe, but we know, and especially in this space, I hope we know that people have been studying in scientific ways the earth for as long as there have been human beings, but it hasn't been codified and institutionalized in the way that it has when it came from Western Europe. So there was a primacy on viewpoints, through colonialism, and there was, so it became, in the cultural perceptions of fungi sort of became institutionalized. And I do cite we cite several times Anna Singh, who is a anthropologist. She wrote, many of you may know the book Mushrooms at the End of the World. And she's an anthropologist who sort of works in biological realms a bit. Although I don't think she identifies as a scientist, but she and also Donna Haraway, another anthropologist I cite quite a bit. They both wrote pieces somewhat in communication with one another. But they talk about, I think Donna Haraway writes, actually now I'm kind of sorry, my mind is like not the sharpest right now because
no apologies.
But well, I forget, I'm now blanking. I think Anna Singh was writing about how mushrooms were basically like fungi. Well, there are several examples of how fungi have been sort of defiant to structural norms, and sort of capitalistic norms. And one is in the piece Mushrooms as Companion Species, where she talks about how mushrooms grew on the margins of agricultural, when agriculture was starting to become established and pivotal to societies in Eurasia, when like Eurasia and some Mesopotamian societies, farming was sort of a top-down structure where, the farmers would send a lot of proportion of their yields to elites, and then they were sometimes use mushrooms as these subversive sort of companion species that grew on the edge of their farms to supplement their diets in this under-the-table type of way. And so there's just all of these examples of how like mushrooms have continued to like defy our control and appear as companions throughout human history, and some of that has been to the like sort of the chagrin, or to in a disturbing way. It sometimes it makes people uncomfortable. Their our lack of control over them, I think, makes people like deeply uncomfortable. And so we in the paper we compare mycophobia to queerphobia, because mycophobia is a widespread belief that mushrooms are other, and they're a disturbance or a perturbation, and similarly queer people are not, they're not of this norm. They're not, they're disturbed is how historical people would refer to, and currently, I mean, too. So we're really interested in trying to like excavate, and lay bare like why do we think these ways, and how does that affect us today? So like these aren't just old stories that we tell, like, oh, mushrooms, people used to hate them. Like the effect of that is really material and really present. I mean, we have fungal conservation is practically non-existent. Like we don't know like what's endangered or why, and it's because so few people study them, and then comparatively we have barely any resources for like getting good enough studies done so that we can get the quantifiable data that we need to like prove to the government that they're endangered or threatened. And I mean, I'm not saying fungal conservation, there is important people working in fungal conservation. I saw that Juliana was on the call, and she does a lot of work, and Greg Mueller is a scientist. I mean, I don't want to undermine, those people are working hard and they're doing important work, but they're up against such an uphill battle because we have so little resources for fungal conservation. So I think that there's a lot. The effects of what is normalized in an academic setting and how that happens is really important, and but under interrogated. So I just wanted to sort of, in this paper, we wanted to like just call attention to challenging not so much science as a discipline, but I think science as a culture, right? Science, what is the culture of science? And it's a culture of following the data. It's a culture of it's a linear culture. It's a culture of hierarchy, and I think that can be very powerful. We can learn about like the atom, and we can learn about we can make fabulous medicines that we all rely on,
Right.
and you know, I am a scientist and I love science, but I also want to be able to walk in, you know, as Robin Kimmerer says, like see with multiple lenses, right? You know, hold on to both the, you know, you can have multiple ways of knowing coexisting, and in traditional ecological knowledge, I think that you know, that is a great companion worldview to hold with science. So we wanted to also in this piece elevate traditional ecological frameworks, which you know, have again existed all around the world for thousands of years,
Mm.
and have discovered incredible incredible things, you know, about the natural world that, you know, Western scientists are only just getting to, but other peoples have known about for, you know, hundreds to thousands of
Right.
years.
Right. Thank you so much for just breaking that down. That was amazing.
I
Hope
felt a
you,
little scattered, so I'm sorry. I hope that was like coherent.
no, I think we all followed along. I think everybody's feeling it, and you know, I hope you all see why we have Patty here. That was fire. That was amazing, and see why it's such an inspiration. You're very well spoken, and so I really, really, really appreciate that.
You.
Yeah, I also did want to shout out Juliana. I saw they were on here. A great, also another great mycologist down in Chile. See the work that they're doing. I believe there's a fundraiser right now for a fungi foundation, and they're one of the few, if not the only right now, first people right now in Chile doing fungi conservation work. So yeah, so thank you. And I guess I also wanted to, you know, earlier today I was talking to some friends who were here, and we were talking a little bit about Robin Wall Kimmerer's work as well, and how she's been an inspiration. And you know, we're just talking about you know, our relationship with science and our relationship with our indigeneity as well. And you know, Robin's been a great teacher in that way for us, and an inspiration. And I kind of wanted to, you know, I know she helped, or she was on the board to revise your paper as well.
Yeah,
Is
Robin,
that correct?
Dr. Kimmer, she's a professor at ESF where I went, and she's so amazing. And I was really honored. Yeah, she was on my committee for my PhD. So yeah, I was really, and the paper was that chapter in my dissertation. So she gave me like some feedback on that, and I was really thrilled to. And of course, I was very inspired by her during my education,
Sure.
and attending her workshops in particular that were run by her and her grad students about like seeing through multiple lenses. You know, one thing I like about ESF is we do fly the Haudenosaunee flag, and we
Mm,
have several Indigenous professors who are like central to the spirit of ESF. So yeah, I definitely credit my like a big part of you know, my sort of development of this paper. I developed as a student, you know, as an attendee of those workshops. So
mm,
yeah, I'm very grateful to Robin.
yeah, I am too. Very
Mhm.
grateful to the Haudenosaunee people and Robin. So thank you again. Um, I know you wanted to kind of go through, ask me a question
Yeah,
or
I wanted to
two,
ask
and
you a few questions to like spin it around here.
uh-oh.
Yeah, I wanted to, I mean, just, you know, keep it chill, but no pressure. But I wanted to ask, you know, if you wanted to, I guess maybe we can, maybe because I feel like this is the level, like the point in the conversation, but I wanted to ask you about your relationship to science, um, as the founding member of POC Fungi, and then, you know, maybe what do you think about academia as a non-academic mycologist, and you know, I'm interested in like, you know, what does it look like to decolonize academia, and do you think that's possible? And just kind of
Yeah.
wanted to, yeah, just
Well,
maybe go wherever you want with that.
thank you. No, thanks for asking. I think a lot of folks who maybe have not had a chance to speak with me in person maybe are not sure where I stand. So I think it's a kind of a good opportunity to, you know, weed through some of that. And I'm sure I won't be able to finish, you know, explaining that right now, and we only have a little bit more time. But in a nutshell, you know, it's been quite a road. It's been quite a journey to try to navigate science and my own indigeneity, and so for a long time I was rejected in both spaces, and I think it's not until recently that folks are starting to put value on community science, citizen science, and and I think that's really rare. And I think you said it before in mycology. That's kind of a rare occurrence. It's kind of a special thing about mycology that there is room for that. That maybe there's not much room for that in many other practices. So, but as an Indigenous person, it's interesting to you want to show what your community is capable of, and you want to be respected in every circle, right? And because so a lot of this work has been coming up with this community has been kind of a way to empower ourselves and kind of a way to stop. For a long time I was kind of elbowing my way into spaces that maybe weren't so welcoming or so didn't recognize non-academics. So I think creating a community where we can empower ourselves and validate our own work and our own experiences was just really empowering for me. And I think it's done a lot for my community in general. Like I said, I have some friends here today who shared just some good affirmations on as far as sharing this work and making it accessible to folks in my community, and making it relevant as well, and making it belong to us, making it so that it's not something that you just read off a book or learn from a white person or learn from a professor, but it's you learn it from somebody who looks like you, who has the same experiences like you, who's grown up in the same areas as you, has shared trauma and shared, like I said, shared experiences. And living here in San Diego, I've had to navigate, just a lot of different worlds, especially if you have family on the other side of the border. So, I always have to mention that, we've kind of grown up navigating different worlds, different spaces. And so it's been important to, I've learned how to bridge that gap, right? And how to, I've been forced to navigate. And so I also see it as almost my responsibility to kind of, share and empower folks in my community, share what I know so that they can, when they go out into whether it be institutions or non-institutional spaces, they can kind of know what they're talking about and can have some sense of ownership and pride in these things. So, one person I have a lot of, heroes and people that I look up to that are here and not here, but one of those people is why can't I think his name right now? Mycologist, black mycologist, old Peanut.
Carver.
Thank you. Like, huge name.
The brain fog is at 1,000. We're all
Thank you. But I think, like when I learned about George Washington Carver, it was actually at the New Moon Mycology Summit that I learned about George Washington Carver, because I always just knew George Washington Carver as being the peanut guy, right? And did some work with, during the Great Depression. I didn't really understand too much, and like the degree of what, like, the involvement that he had, really. That he was involved in mycology and what he had done in that research, and finding out what different plagues and other fungi were. He has a lot of fungi named after him, and then come to find out he was also somebody who advocated for food security and advocated for education for black farmers. So it was huge inspiration for me, actually, and to me it just solidified and I wanted to share that knowledge to to other black folks who can again, maybe they can identify and take ownership of of their place in mycology,
Yeah.
their place in science, their place in and discovering the world and being curious about the world in that way, especially when it comes to the tiny fungi, like some of these pathogens that you study and that George Washington Carver was studying as well, um, so yeah, I think academia can be decolonized. I think it's just a matter it's going to take community to do it, and placing value outside of the institutions, and I think it might take a while to get there, and there might need to be some sort of system in place or something, but as far as being able to call ourselves academics without having like a large institution stamp on it,
Right.
so so for right now I call myself an amateur mycologist, right? And for now I call myself all these things, and I love the word amateur actually, but yeah, just in thinking about the future and the way we structure science and and with degrees and the way we validate all of those things is I think still being shaped and formed, and I'm happy to be at least challenge our notion of what an academic looks like and is, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you're doing is so important. I
Thank you.
think that giving space, like a truly safe space for people to learn without sort of like the overbearing history of like a white institution.
Right.
I mean, that's a struggle to be just in the walls of some of those places, or predominantly male institution, or when you see faculty photos of ESF on the walls from like generations or just a few decades ago, it's just all white men, 100%.
Right.
It's staggering. So I think that, I do think that, we are chipping away at that, but I think central to changing culture at large is also having non-academic spaces where real learning occurs. And obviously, of course, like I think your POC Fungi is an excellent example of creating space where, people can show up with, whatever knowledge they have, and learn a lot. And, you have people who are really brilliant at educators, but there's no requirement specifically to get your foot in the door, and then you can learn. And I think that one thing I do like about mycology is that there are some really, really important mycologists who are not academically trained, who've had a really important role in this, like in forming mycological knowledge. And I do think, yeah, as you mentioned, like it is a bit more than a lot of other disciplines. There aren't too many like amateur cancer biologists.
Right.
So I do think that that's something that's really cool. And a lot of that has to do, like I do get into this in my paper, which is like the decentralizing of education is a feminist principle. And it's an idea that like learning can take place outside of a structured setting and out of the classroom. And I think mycological societies are sort of sites for this like feminist principle to take shape. You can learn in this like not in really this like hierarchical way, and they're often free, and so often people in those societies are really willing to just teach you anything that you want to know. So I think that is a really good thing. And I think they need each other. Yeah.
For sure. For sure. Wow. Well, we got 10 more minutes. We can open it up to some questions if you want. And we can do that. A couple of them we'll take. If you want to ask a couple in this little chat thing, y'all can. We'll try to get to one or two. But also, folks have been asking about your paper and where they can find it. And
okay. So it'll be maybe we can like post about it when it's
Yeah.
published, but it will be open access. So the journal, again, it's called Catalyst, and that's an open access journal. Feminism, Theory, and Technoscience is the subtitle, and it's an open access journal, so it will be entirely available. And I use something called ResearchGate, which is like just a research profile for academics. And so you can just search my name, my full name, Patricia Kaishian, and ResearchGate, and then you'll see my papers and stuff. So I'll post it there too. So yeah, but we can like link it or something when it does come out. Hopefully any day now. I'm a little like disappointed that I'm still waiting, but yeah, they said it was the first week of November, so
Awesome.
Any day now.
Yay.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree with some of the folks on here. That went really quick, and we actually have a lot of questions we didn't get to, and I know we can do this again. So maybe we'll check in later, and maybe we'll do a part 2 of this some other time.
Yeah, I would love that. I also, there was more. I really want to I wanted to talk about a bunch of other things with you. So yeah, I would be super down to do a part 2, and maybe after the paper comes out and people can like read it, and we can get a little deeper into some of the concepts, because I'm just kind of like just spitfiring like out all this stuff, but it's a lot. There's a lot of layers of theory there that I think are really fascinating to explore, and I'd love to like unpack that with people. And yeah.
Thank you. Well, we'll take a question or two if y'all. I think there's a little question box, and you can ask a question there or on this thing.
I did see someone asked about working with collections. I would love to talk about that.
Yeah, I can talk about working with collections. Oh yeah, that'd be cool. Thanks, Nay.
Yeah. It's Nate. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. So I'm a taxonomist, and I work with, and both for my PhD and my current job as a postdoc, I'm working with collections. So basically, like, we have fungaria or herbaria, as plants, as fungi used to be considered plants. So sometimes technically called herbaria, but fungarium is a good word. So basically, for those who aren't familiar, they're just a library of biological material that's been preserved. So it's usually just dehydrated and then stored with data about where it was collected. And at Purdue, we have one of the, I don't remember which one, but I learned yesterday that we have the oldest fungus in a collection at Purdue. It's in the 1700s.
Whoa.
Yeah. So there's stuff that's really old, like hundreds of years old, they've been tidally, like, painstakingly organized by taxa, by group, by their species, genus, species, family, etc. So it's kind of like a library and what's really awesome is that they're treasure troves of information. So you can get all sorts of information by studying collections. You can learn about how patterns of biodiversity from hundreds of years ago, before, massive urbanization and habitat destruction, or you can get DNA. I'm using them now to get DNA sequences out of, and so you can apply new techniques, scientific techniques, to things that were collected before, we even really knew what DNA was. So that's pretty cool. So I'm kind of like a custodian of the collection. I kind of organize them and curate them. I'm a curator, I guess is the title.
Cool.
But yeah, so I just sort of like work to, I'm working on this project as the Rust Barcode project. But I'm also just interested in advocating for collections, because I think they're underutilized, and they're not really. I think scientists could do a little bit more to communicate to the public like the value of them, but they're tremendously valuable. But they're kind of suffering from a decline of interest and funding as well. But there are these just absolute treasure troves of biodiversity data. So like places like the Museum of Natural History, for example. You go in and see all the exhibits, but what you don't see is behind the scenes. They have just floors, just entire floors dedicated to preserved insects and jellyfish, or not jellyfish, so you probably can't really preserve those, but like, marine creatures and all sorts of fossils and, all sorts of organisms or imprints of organisms that have been left, for decades. So that's, you don't see that going on, but all museums pretty much have something like that, and doing a lot of taxonomic research. So it's yeah, I like collections. They're exciting.
Yeah, I can tell. I love that. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's very cool. Are there any other questions? We'll take one more. And just thank you everybody for tuning in again and taking the time off for this night.
Yeah, I'm happy to have my mind away from, or
yeah, I feel that. Thank you. Well, I don't see any other questions. I think you've answered so many. I think you did a really good job. So you want to kind of just have the last word or anything?
Oh yeah. Well, not really. I mean, thank you for listening. Thank you, Mario, for having me. It's a pleasure being in your company and being your friend and being in solidarity with you in mycology and in life. So I'm really happy to know you, and I feel that the world is better for you and for POC Fungi. So.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you for saying that. You're amazing, and the feeling's mutual, definitely mutual. So, and it's everybody on here tuning in also who make it happen. So, yeah, I think people want a part 2.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
We're gonna have to do this again for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I would love that.
Yay. Well, thank you again. Thank you for inspiring us all. Thank you for doing the work and the places you're doing it, and just making it easier for more folks to make it into those spaces again. More queer folks, more women, more Armenians, more people of color. So just thank you for all you've done and do and probably have to put up with on a daily, I'm sure.
Yeah. But it's knowing that other people's journey will be easier makes it super worth it. So
for sure. Yay.
Yeah. All right. Well,
thank you again.
To stay healthy and stay safe. Drink a lot of water. Drink some chaga tea.
Yay, for sure. Yeah. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Take a break off of this thing. Go relax and do what makes you happy, gives you pleasure. Thanks again, Patty. Okay. Always fun to be with you.
Thanks,
Take care.
Mario. Bye.
Bye, y'all. Okay, I'm ending this thing somehow. Let me see. Thanks again, y'all.